20. Creepy alien abductions. According to Reddit. Number 20. Okay, so on March 24th, 2015, I walked out into my backyard around 11 p.m. I live in boring old Oregon, so honestly, where I live is isolated. I felt like many times there is supposed to be something waiting for me in the backwoods every day. I felt like somebody wanted me to go into the woods and kept sending me signals. Whether it was random sounds at night or small glares of light, I kept questioning what the heck could it be that is so obnoxious. I always go there during the day and there's nothing but branches, trees. So 11:25, I waited to yell into the woods and asked to stop messing around, but it was difficult too. I was honestly frozen. I felt paralyzed. I tried to scream for help, but no words came. I kept walking towards the woods and I felt something grab me by the arm, shove me through the woods. Then I wake up, and I thought it was a dream. I went outside, of course, and went where I was, and where I was shoved for the first time in my life. I see branches broken and all the leaves on the ground were swept away from each other. I left around that month, and the house is still on sale at Century 21. I plan to go see it this summer and set up a paranormal crew and wait out at night. I honestly think aliens took me and put me back to bed as an experiment. Number 19. This technically didn't happen to me, but I'll share it anyway. My mom and grandma were driving in my old suburban neighborhood in the middle of the day. As they came out from passing under a large tree that hung over the road, they heard a really loud noise and looked up and saw what they believed to be a plane about to crash into them. They started screaming and don't remember what happened. They didn't talk about it until months later and thought it was a dream. I don't know if I even believed them, but I just thought I'd share. Number 18. I was 15. Every night, a guy that I'll call Jay and I would sneak out at about midnight and go home around 4 to 5 in the morning before our parents would wake up for work. On one particular night, we had just snuck out. It was around 1 a.m. We headed to my backyard, laid on the trampoline, and stared at the stars and just spoke like we always did. Now, if you're in a room right now and you look around, you'll see the definite four corners where your ceiling and walls meet. You can see how square they turn. Edge of the wall, sharp turn, second wall, same with the ceiling. You can see each individual flat surface. The sky did that. It went from staring at the stars to looking like a cube of a sky. From the southeast corner of the sky came this giant UFO. I mean huge. As if it took up a quarter of the entire sky. We both stared at it in dead silence. It didn't make any noise, even as it moved, and while it spun, it was only hovering straight. The spinning didn't move like you imagine a frisbee would do. The sides just turned while it moved. I guess what it looked like doesn't matter, but Jay and I had our eyes dead set on this thing. We didn't say a word. We didn't point to show the other person as it began coming towards us. We both flipped over. Again, no hints, no talking, no eye contact. In total sync, we flipped onto our stomachs and stayed as flat and quiet as we could. Now ducking from something sounds totally normal, almost instinct, but that's not what that was. It was literally almost telepathy. I can remember us having a mental conversation of stay flat and it won't see us, don't move. We watch it make a weird C shape as it goes across the sky, and although it felt totally in slow motion, it could have only been a few minutes because I think both of us held our breath the entire time. Now, here's the weirdest part. As soon as it was out of sight, boom, daybreak. We had literally just gotten to the yard, and I know it was 1:15 a.m. because I checked, but the minute we felt released from laying flat, it was very bright, like 7:30, 8 o'clock a.m. bright. I don't remember taking or talking to him at all afterwards, other than making eye contact and then making a break for our homes before our parents noticed we weren't there. A few weeks, even maybe months maybe. I'm talking to my brother's girlfriend about what happened. Apparently she's really into that shit, but also completely terrified. She said that the fact that it felt like a few minutes, but then it was suddenly 6 or 7 hours later, truly 100% makes her think that we were abducted. She was serious. I made a joke about how I should go to hypnotherapy to unblock the memories, and she deadpans and says, "Don't. People who were abducted are traumatized by what happened to them. They even get PTSD." The next day she texted me about how she couldn't sleep. I think abduction is a little bit of a stretch, and she watched too many Discovery Channel documentaries. The weird loss of time does irk me though. I do know what we saw was 100% real. Aliens? I don't know. Abductions? I don't know. Number 17. I was camping in a campground in northern Georgia with some friends. It was starting to downpour, so everyone left their tents in the woods and decided to rent one of the site cabins for everyone to sleep in. I decided I'd just sleep in my car because they wanted to stay up late and I was tired from kayaking all day. He's making me tired. He's so tired. I woke up to the rain stopping, and it was kind of cold in the car, and I'd forgotten my sleeping bag in my tent. I checked the cabin to see if there was any room left, and the light was on, and everybody was fast asleep. It was 3 a.m. I didn't want to squeeze in, so I decided to trek my way to my tent in the dark with a small pen light. In order to get my tent, I had to pass by everyone's that they left. Mine was the last one, and even then was 50 feet at least from the previous tent before it. I got in my tent, covered up with my sleeping bag, and pretended to catch the last few hours of sleep before the sunrise. No more than 10 to 15 minutes from me getting into my tent, I began to hear light whispers right outside the tent door. They weren't English, and to my recollection, they were indecipherable, not any language that I had ever heard at all. Just as the voices started, 2 orbs appeared together outside the tent. They weren't the same glare as a flashlight would make, and both were two different colors that, to the best of my ability, had no real distinct color, just colorful. The whispers outside the tent began arguing louder between each other, but still in a hushed tone. And as the whispers grew louder, the light began swirling around the tent behind me, to the side and front. Not in the movement that one could make with flashlights. At this point, I realized no footsteps could be heard. I uncovered myself and knelt on the tent floor, preparing for the zipper to come undone like in a horror movie, and I was flipping through my mind on what option to take. I was the most terrified I had ever been. Fight or flight. The lights swirled faster, and the voices grew louder, but still breathy. Probably breathy. And whispery. My mind raced and I was sweating despite the cold. And then, just as the lights shut off, just like that, the lights shut off like a switch, and the whisper stopped, and nothing but silence of an empty wood. And there was nothing but the silence of an empty wood. He didn't write it, I'm just saying. I stood there as I could, as still as I could, and I didn't dare go outside the tent till the sun came up. It was, and still is, the scariest moment of my life. I hope this makes sense. I've never written it out before. If I need to answer anything, I can try in between moments of work. Number 16. When I was 4, aliens came in through my bedroom window. I was terrified, but I couldn't move. My sister was asleep in the bed next to me, and the aliens had big heads and big black eyes. It was as if I was in a dream, but I was very much awake. I tried to cry out, but I couldn't make a sound. The aliens left, and eventually I was able to crawl into my parents' room. Completely freaked out, I didn't talk for 24 hours. My mom was very protective and patient, for which I am still extremely grateful. It wasn't until I was an adult and heard people's description of sleep paralysis that I had an explanation of what had happened to me. Such relief to understand that what I went through was not abnormal in spite of this knowledge. A part of me still has trouble letting go of the hallucination that happened to me that night. It's never happened again. That's just what we want you to think. Silly humans. Number 15. About a year ago, I was chatting with a friend about a creepy, seemingly supernatural experience that we had both had as children. I chalked mine up to overactive imagination and just seeing things that weren't there. As I went into detail, her eyes kept getting wider, and she started pulling things up on her phone about aliens. After she showed me some drawing and other things, I admitted to her that I'm absolutely terrified of aliens. I'm going to tell you all these stories. And I would genuinely appreciate feedback. Was she just fucking with me? Or do these sound like alien encounters to anyone else? Between the ages of 5 and 10, I lost time. A lot. One of the more notable times that I clearly remember being confused was when I was laying on the floor watching TV. It was about 6 p.m. and I looked out the window and it was still bright outside, and then I blinked. When I opened my eyes again, it was 3 a.m. The TV was off and I was sitting on the sofa. That sort of thing happened a lot for a few years. Well, at that age, man. Then there were things I would see. I never had curtains or blinds on my bedroom windows. I was always absolutely terrified of windows, and I still am. Just get a Just get a Mac, man. Just get a Mac. Most nights before falling asleep, I would see head shapes outside. Not peeking up from the bottom of the window, but either from the side or looking in from the top of the window, like it was upside down with a cocked head looking in. I had a second-floor bedroom window, so I thought it was impossible for something to be looking in, so I would just cover my head and try to sleep. Most of the time, I ended up sneaking into my parents' or my brother's bedroom at night because of it. I would see the shapes in their windows as well, but at least I felt safer because I wasn't alone. Then, when I was closer to 10, I basically slept in my brother's room every night. We had moved into a new house, and his room was in the basement. It wasn't really a room, but it had one wall, then a big open side that was separated from the rest of the basement with a long curtain. I had pretty bad insomnia by that point, and I didn't typically fall asleep until around 3 or 4 in the morning. I was laying on the floor in my sleeping bag, watching Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, and the curtains started to move. I look over to see a hand reaching through the bottom of the curtain. It was something skeletal looking, with long fingers and very pronounced bone structure. The wrist it was attached to was also very thin and had no hair. I sat up and I screamed, and when I did, the hand froze and then quickly went back under the curtain. I then heard something running up the stairs, but I didn't hear a door open or close. I curled up the foot of my brother's bed and stayed awake until morning. That was the last thing I remember happening. I still lost time off and on until I was about 16. Aliens freak me out. Always have, always will. I can't watch alien movies or read stories without getting extremely uncomfortable. I've never done my own research, and I avoid anything about the subject if I can, but I'm truly curious if anyone else thinks the same thing that my friend does. Number 14. I don't honestly believe that I was abducted. I just know that if what I had was a nightmare, it was such a nightmare that I still remember it to this day in nearly clear, full clarity. I was 4 or 5 years old and my father was working night shift. My mother was watching football in our living room and I went to sleep on some chairs near the entertainment center. I don't recall how or why, just that I conked out in that spot. I woke up some undetermined amount of time later and the lights were still on, but the TV was off. And the house was unnaturally quiet, like the sound was getting sucked up. I looked at the TV first, then turned my head left and saw my mother floating about a foot off the ground with her eyes glowing orange and her mouth hanging open. Naturally, I panicked. I didn't know where I was going or what I planned to do, just that I had to get out of that room. So I bolted for the hallway that led to the bedrooms and found myself unable to move. Something walked out of my bedroom in the back. It couldn't have been much bigger than me as a child, but I remember it was brown and leathery looking, with arms that were too long for a human. The eyes were red and flashed like bike reflectors. I didn't even know what extraterrestrial was, much less seen the movie at this point in my life. For the record, I couldn't move. I couldn't even scream even though I was trying. All I could do was stand there while the thing hesitated at the end of the hallway. Then it screamed like a bird with something stuck in its throat and waddle ran straight for me. I woke up on the chairs again, screaming and crying until I couldn't anymore from exhaustion. My mother didn't and doesn't remember any of it. After that, I was pretty well spooked by any feasible account of alien abduction or UFOs in general. Several episodes of feeling like I was getting jerk-legged first out of my bed all the way into my teenage years. Thankfully, nothing like what I remembered from that happened again. Yeah. Number 13. I went to sleep on the top bunk. Woke up because someone was shining light in my eyes. When my eyes adjusted, it was actually some kind of super bright light coming from my bedroom window and flooding the room. I walk over and see a huge triangular craft floating above my apartment. I looked down because I was sure everyone on the street would be freaking out, but no. Instead, they all had this zombie-like look on their face, and drivers were just stopped at green lights, and not a single soul was looking up. Suddenly, the craft shined one of its other lights onto me, and I don't remember anything after that. But here's the kicker. If it was just a dream, how the fuck did I wake up on the bottom bunk? Sleepwalking and remember the time, and dreaming at the same time. Also, I somehow climbed down the ladder to go to sleep on the bottom bunk. At any rate, this story always kind of makes my skin crawl whenever I recount it. Number 12. I had a very vivid dream years ago. I'm not saying I was abducted. I'm saying I woke up and I was like, damn. It was as vivid as having a conversation with somebody who was sitting next to you. Man. Look. just to give you an idea of how in-depth and granular the information I received in this dream was, here's a quote from the thread that I posted. They've been here almost as longer than us. They've had bases under the ocean floors in various places. They said something about having some kind of sonic repellent near the entrances of these places to deter sea life, as they had an issue with large animals being sucked into their installations due to differential pressure. Well, that must be real. Look, man. Number 11. Number 11. When I was about 7, my parents and I lived briefly in an apartment in Chicago, next door to my dad's old house. For whatever reason, on this night, we all slept on the living room floor, in between beds, or in between my parents. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up and was entranced by an orange glow. Out of one of the windows. I wandered the 5 or 10 feet over to it and looked out to see what I believed to be the house next door completely gone, and a spacecraft in its place over an empty lot. I remember just standing there, staring at it in disbelief, feeling as though I couldn't move an inch. And it must have felt like it was for ages. And then bam, I woke up, back between my parents. So I guess it was a dream? You'd think, except immediately after waking up, I rolled over and puked my brains out. I was sick, and I don't throw up unless there's a serious stomach virus going on, so it was for an undetermined reason. I won't sit there and claim that I was abducted. As I got older, I started to rationalize that I was probably just scared shitless by the dream, but I always kind of wonder. My bing bing bong. Number 10 on the list of 20 creepy alien abductions. They're gonna get ya. They're gonna get ya. I was at a friend's cabin one night with 5 or 6 friends. It was late at night, and we were all hypnotized for about 15 to 20 minutes looking at these 3 dancing lights above the hill across the lake. Then, a shooting star went across the sky, and it lit everything up almost as bright as day. We all ran into the cabin. When looking back at it, I get a strange feeling thinking of how we don't have much memories to recollect after we went inside, deciding to just fall asleep right away instead of talking about what we just saw. Some of my old friends get upset if I bring it up, what we saw, let alone our actions after. Boy, that's crazy as fuck. Someone says, sounds like you could all benefit from sitting down and hashing this shit out. And someone else says, how would the ones that were replaced by aliens benefit? Now you're talking. Number 9. When I was 13, I was a chubby, curly-haired goof, and I was excited for my birthday within the next week. I'd been getting very little sleep due to a mixture of excitement for the giant cookie I requested as my birthday cake and school stress bullshit, bully shit like that. I'm a beta cuck, you know how it is. It kept me up most of the night for a few nights. Wings of Redemption is live now. Talk about spooky. So, this experience might be caused by a mix of sleep deprivation, night terrors, I was getting ready to sleep and snugged into bed when I realized the lights were still on. So, I sit up in bed and peek at my window, and I lock eyes with a gray head covering my entire view and beyond the window. Next thing I know, it was morning, and I was tucked back into bed with the lights still on, but my window was cracked open slightly. I told my parents about what happened at breakfast, and they told me to stop lying for attention. I lost a little bit more sleep from the experience and got over it pretty quickly. It never happened again. Not too fascinating. I'm a believer in aliens due to the size of the universe. The size of the universe. However, I don't fully believe it was an alien I saw. A little bit of me wants to believe. I want to believe. Number 8. I don't know if I was abducted or not, but I did witness something pretty unexplainable. My ex and I were driving out of my suburban neighborhood super late one night. We're on the way to go eat some Waffle House. As we're nearing the exit of my neighborhood, I look up into the night sky, and we both notice these 3 strange orange lights in a triangle formation. We then stop the car in the middle of the road to figure out what the fuck we're looking at. These lights didn't have the quality of lights you see emitting from a plane or a star. When you look at the stars, they are so far away that they almost seem 2D. These lights somehow felt 3D. These lights were much bigger and seemed closer, like high enough into the sky to be well above the trees, but not above the clouds. And they were just floating, not moving up or down. They were just eerily still. I really don't know how to explain how still these things were, but it was unnatural. And I know that sounds stupid, but that's how it felt when I saw them, and I wish I could articulate it better. But when I saw this, I was both mesmerized and sort of in shock. I've always been a UFO enthusiast, and I've always wanted to see something bizarre like this, and finally it was happening. I couldn't take my eyes off of it. I couldn't take my eyes off what I was looking at. I feel like I didn't for an hour? I don't know how much time passed, but it really did feel like an unnatural amount of time. Finally, these globes of light just abruptly dissolved away, kind of like they were sucked into a black hole or something. We broke our gaze, look at each other, and my ex asks me if I just saw what she saw. And yeah, we couldn't come up with an explanation at all. To this day, no one believes me, and I don't care. I saw what I saw, and I'm now fully confident that we're not alone. Number 7. I had a year-long experience of strange events that I've never been able to explain or have a full memory of. It started in winter working up north on a project. Our crew was put on a motel 10 minutes outside of the largest town in the area. I somehow got upgraded to a king-size bed with couches, nice room. Our days were long, so I used the couches to stack my clothes in piles, jeans, hoodies, etc. I had brought my entire desktop computer with me and was in the middle of a massive argument with my ex over Facebook Messenger at 1 a.m. during the second week up there. At some point, I opened my eyes and I was sitting on top of a pile of hoodies on the couch. The time was now 4 a.m. I rushed over to the computer. At some point after 1 a.m., I had stopped typing a sentence midway through. My ex had left a ton of messages throughout the night demanding that I answer back. She also left missed calls and texts on my phone that was still sitting beside the mouse. I figured I had somehow passed out, but wasn't sure how I ended up on top of the hoodies on the couch and not just falling onto the bed. I went to sleep normally for the remaining couple of hours before work, and a couple of days later, a stranger scenario occurs. My routine was we'd finish work, I'd come back to the motel around 9 p.m., shower, change, drive into town for a late night dinner at Boston Pizza, the only restaurant open late other than McDonald's. So this particular night I went through my routine, took a shower, changed, headed for the door. I got to my car. And when I turned it on, something felt wrong. I looked at the time and it was now 2 a.m. I had no idea how I had lost around 4 hours between showering and getting into my car, but it felt weird. My whole body felt weird. I felt violated, like a rape victim who describes waking up from being assaulted while passed out. You feel violated, but you have no idea what happened. Not a single memory or explanation, and I've stayed up all night scared shitless, trying to figure out what happened. Why was I missing 4 hours? If I had passed out, why didn't I wake up on the floor? Why did I feel violated? The rest of the project, nothing else happened. But once I got home, things started happening that were just weird. There's more to my experiences if people want to know. It only lasted for about a year, but these two events were the starting catalysts. I've never actually figured out what happened, but most people I've asked all seem to agree that it had to be abduction events. Bruh. Number 6. About 20 years ago, I was walking home from the shops with my dad, and we stopped to watch something really odd in the sky. There were lights, 2 lights, slightly bigger than the stars, zooming around and orbiting each other, making figure 8s. And then they stopped moving, got bigger and bigger, until bright light filled the sky, and they were gone. We carried on our journey home. We hadn't stopped for more than 5 minutes. The whole journey should have been around 20 minutes. When we get home, my mom is freaking out. We'd been gone for 65 minutes. Our watches both still working, but we're 45 minutes behind every clock in the house. She had neighbors, friends about looking for us. I don't know what happened to us or what we saw. Maybe nothing. Number 5. I live in a pretty secluded part of Washington State. I was in my late teens and my parents had gone to Seattle for something, so I was put in charge of the property. I was closing everything up. The barn we own had some other small utility buildings, and when I look up and see 3 reddish-orange lights in a triangle formation, they were just floating there, as if they were magnified stars, so magnified, in fact, that everything was slightly illuminated by their warm hue. I'm mesmerized, standing there, and suddenly lose my sense of balance, as if the ground in front of me has begun rising. I pass out. Next thing I know, I'm on the ground in the barn. The barn I had locked up. Needless to say, I was petrified. I scurried to the house with my tail between my legs, scared and confused. I slept not at all that night, and any sense of security that I had was now gone. Even though I was locked safely in my home, I felt hopelessly exposed. Number 4. Not entirely sure if we were abducted, but my wife, who is a non-believer, and I both have missing time. We were having sex on our bed when we suddenly both came to. And we were in totally different places in the room. Not sure how much time had passed, but she looked at me and said, "What the fuck just happened?" I said I wasn't sure. "But you never gotten it that hard in your life, have you?" I'm kidding. It doesn't say that. Neither of us were scared, and we were both incredibly tired. We decided we would just go to bed and talk about it in the morning. I look up instances of missing time, and a lot of them said the same thing. When they came to, they were just very tired. They knew something was totally weird, but just wanted to go to sleep. Number 3. Was laying on the couch with my blanket over me, and I look at the clock, and it says something like 11:23 a.m. Suddenly a white flash happens, and it's 12:40 p.m. It happens again 3 more times, and by the time I could comprehend what was going on, it was 5:30 p.m. Every time it would happen, there would be 15 minutes of confusion and trying to move. I was stuck in a dreamlike state until it stopped happening. Number 2. I was home alone in this little house that I lived in the middle of nowhere. It was probably around 2 a.m., and I was just listening to music, enjoying having the place to myself for a change, when all of a sudden, my dogs start going crazy. Normally when someone pulls into the driveway or comes up to the back door, they go to the door, they heard the noise beyond, and peek through the blinds to see who it is. But this night, they are just running all around the house from door to door, barking louder than they normally do. When I stood up to go see what the hell they were on about, I noticed that the whole house seemed to be lit up with a deep blue light. Turning into the living room, it became obvious that it was emanating in from each window. I put on my shoes to go outside and see who was there, but by the time I got out there, the light had faded away. There was no sound of a car engine or really anything. And where I live, you could hear a car coming from a mile away. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I had the weirdest sense of fight or flight, where neither option seemed possible, like I was frozen to the spot. I wanted to turn around and get back inside, and then I just was. Right back in the chair that I was listening to music in, as if I had just blinked, and there I was. I don't really like telling people about it because it skeeves me out so bad. As we reach number 1 on the list of 20 creepy alien abductions. It reads as follows. I never told anyone this story because I never thought they would believe me. I was home alone one evening and had gone to sleep for the night. I live with my significant other and 2 indoor cats, but she was out of state traveling for business. I woke up in the middle of the night, wasn't sure of the time, but it was completely dark because my body was freezing cold. I actually like it cool when I sleep and usually have the temperature around 70 degrees or colder since I live in central Texas. But this was different. I was ice cold but wrapped in blankets. It was the middle of summer, so evenings aren't cold. When I grabbed my phone to look at the time, it seemed to be off, and I pressed the on button, but it didn't turn on. Since I was half asleep, I shrugged it off. I walked out of my bedroom to go adjust the thermostat and noticed that the cats weren't around. This was weird because these furballs are always hanging out in the bed or around the bed. Anyhow, I walked to the thermostat, tried to adjust it, but the power to the thermostat, I have a Nest, was nil, and the power to the house seemed to be off. I peeked out of the upstairs window to see if any of my neighbors were having power issues and noticed that all of their outdoor lights were working just fine. For the time I woke to the moment was probably 1 to 2 minutes maximum. I decided to wander downstairs to grab some water, but I am startled when I realize that there is a glow of light coming from the first floor. The way my house is situated, I couldn't see the light until I had approached the stairs. I found this odd because the power seemed to be out just upstairs, and I started walking down the stairs and began to hear a faint humming noise. The noise had a high pitch to it, with arbitrary pulses of low sounds, almost like a muffled weed whacker that somebody is throttling at random. As I continue to walk down the stairs, I spot a dark, slowly moving figure in the room with a light at the bottom of the stairs. The next step that I take feels like I walked off the side of a cliff or was sucked into the floor. That is really the best way I can explain it because I don't remember what happened after that moment. I just lost all feeling in my body. My next memory is waking up again to see sound of my phone's alarm. Everything seemed back to normal. I sat there in bed, cats back to being lazy in bed next to me, and tried to think about the 2-minute incident that happened in the middle of the night. I am not a sleepwalker. I was definitely not dreaming. My security system's app shows the time whenever a door is opened or closed. I realized that my security system was disarmed on the app and that the front door had been opened and closed several times throughout the night. I pulled up my security footage from the exterior cameras and was surprised to learn that there was 0 footage from that night. Like the motion sensors reacted to a random car driving by around 10 p.m. and then the next thing is another random car in the morning. So something or someone walked in and out of my front door, but the cameras did not capture any footage? My neighbor across the street had a good security camera that points at my house, so I asked if he could review the footage from the cameras. I told him some made-up story about how I thought someone had broken into the truck. Anyway, he said that it was weird because when he pulled up the footage from that night, his cameras did not record anything, just a time gap once again. My first thought was that I was sleepwalking and the memory was a dream, but it just couldn't have been. When I looked out the window in the middle of the night, I distinctly recall a red pickup truck parked the wrong direction in front of my neighbor's house. I always notice when cars are parked left wheel to the curb because I've gotten a ticket for this in the past. Anyhow, the truck was not there before I went to sleep, based on the footage, but it was there in the morning, based on the footage. So the truck was there, and I saw in the middle of the night. I definitely woke up in the middle of the night, cold as ice, no cats, no working phone or thermostat. Saw the truck out of the window and then got warped by something on the stairs. A couple additional things were different in the house. The security system was disarmed, and I definitely armed it before I went to bed. The light was still on downstairs, and that was obviously off before I went to bed. My whole body smelled like burnt marshmallows. I know this is weird, but it really how it smelled. And lastly, my 55-gallon fish tank that sits at the bottom of the stairs and the entryway was missing 2/3 of the water. Where the fuck did 40+ gallons of water go? The whole area around the tank was bone dry, and the fish were fine. I feel like I was mind-fucked by some thirsty aliens. Hope you enjoyed this list. You'll see me soon. If you liked this, then like the video. Love you.